The courtroom had gone silent, except for the scratch of John's gold pen against paper. His signature, bold, confident, possessive, sealed what he believed was his total victory. Then Kingsley, his own lawyer, leaned across the mahogany table and whispered 5 words that stopped time itself. "The debt is yours now, John." I watched the blood leave my husband's face so completely that for a moment, the liver spots on his temples stood out like ink blots. The smug smile that had been there seconds before, the one he'd worn while his mistress Naomi squeezed his hand in the gallery, simply evaporated. His fingers, which had just signed the final decree with theatrical flourish, began to tremble so violently the Rolex on his wrist, bought with money stolen from elderly investors, rattled against the table edge. This was the moment I'd been building toward for 18 months. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I didn't give him the broken woman performance he'd been expecting since the day he served me divorce papers at the Harrison Foundation Gala in front of 200 of our closest friends. Instead, I smiled for the first time in what felt like a decade, and met his eyes with the cold, surgical clarity of someone who had just won a war he didn't even know we were fighting. "Hello, John," I said quietly. "Let me properly introduce myself. My name is Barbara Monroe. Though after today, it's Barbara Murdoch again, and I'm the woman you spent 12 years underestimating. I'm the silent partner who built your empire while you played emperor. I'm the invisible architect who discovered that your throne was made of predatory loans and tax fraud. And most importantly, I'm the chess player who just convinced you to sign your name to $8 million in hidden liabilities while you thought you were taking everything I had. You see, destroying a narcissist isn't about confrontation. It's not about rage or revenge speeches or dramatic courtroom revelations. It's about patience. It's about playing dead while you learn every secret, document every crime, and build an exit strategy so perfect that your enemy walks straight into the trap while believing he's walking to his coronation. John Monroe thought he divorced a housewife. What he actually did was legally separate himself from the only person who knew where all his bodies were buried and who had been quietly digging up the evidence needed to put him in prison. This is the story of the longest, most patient game I've ever played. I met John Monroe when I was 26, working as a junior analyst at Henderson Price Financial Group. I was good with numbers, meticulous with details, the kind of person who caught errors everyone else missed. I wasn't flashy or memorable. I was competent, reliable, invisible in all the ways that make you indispensable but never celebrated. John was 30, charming in that effortless way some men are, full of ambition and dreams about building a financial empire. We married 8 months later. Nathan came along a year after that. By then, John's consulting business was gaining traction. He needed someone to manage operations, handle client communications, coordinate everything behind the scenes. "Just temporarily," he said, "until I can afford to hire someone." I quit my job. That temporary position lasted 9 years. I became everything John's business needed, managing the entire back office for free, building client relationships, handling crisis calls, coordinating with vendors, creating marketing materials, planning events, managing the books. All while raising Nathan essentially alone. Because John was always traveling, always networking, always building his brand. And he did build a brand. John Monroe became a name people recognized in our city's financial circles. At every gala, every award ceremony, I stood beside him in whatever dress I'd managed to find time to buy. The introductions were always the same. "This is my wife, Barbara." Never his partner. Never the person who built the infrastructure that made everything else possible. I watched John accept awards for vision and leadership. He thanked his mentors, his team, his instincts. After a while, I stopped expecting my name. After a while longer, I started to forget that I'd ever been anything other than John's wife. Then, around year 9, something shifted. John stopped asking for my input. He came home late more often, distant and distracted. He started criticizing small things. My clothes weren't polished enough, my meals too simple. My reluctance to join certain social events showed a lack of ambition. I felt myself being erased. What I didn't understand yet was why. What I didn't know was that John had already decided I'd served my purpose. It happened on a random Tuesday night, 18 months before John asked for a divorce. He was working late again. I was in the home office reconciling accounts, doing the unglamorous work that kept his business appearing successful. That's when I found it. A transfer to an account I didn't recognize. Then another. Then another. I stayed up until 3 in the morning following the trail. What I discovered made my hands shake so badly I had to set down my coffee. The house we lived in had 3 mortgages totaling $1.9 million. Actual value, maybe $1.2 million. We were underwater by $700,000 on a home I thought we owned. The business was worse. Lines of credit maxed at $340,000. Back taxes owed, $215,000. Vendor debts, $280,000. Equipment loans, $125,000. Nearly $1 million drowning the company everyone admired. The cars weren't real, all leased with balloon payments coming due. $180,000 in obligations for vehicles we'd never own. I kept digging. Cryptocurrency investments, $340,000. All lost. Bad business ventures, another $200,000 gone. An apartment I didn't know about, rented for someone I didn't know about. $85,000 spent over 2 years. Luxury purchases that never made it home. Another $150,000. Total debt, approximately $2.7 million. Total actual asset value, maybe $1.8 million. We were negative $900,000, possibly more. John wasn't building an empire. He was building a house of cards with borrowed cards that were also on fire. Then I found something worse. Falsified business statements used to secure loans. Elderly investors receiving fabricated returns. He was running a small-scale Ponzi scheme. I sat in my kitchen at 3 a.m, surrounded by printouts, and felt something cold settle in my chest. My first instinct was to confront him. But I knew John. He'd manipulate the situation, make me feel crazy, probably find a way to blame me. And worse, if he knew I knew, he might try to access the one thing I'd kept separate. My grandmother's voice echoed in my head. A woman should have her own money. Not secret money, just her own. I'd listened. My IRA from my analyst days had grown to $145,000. My grandmother's inheritance, kept carefully separate for 8 years, $280,000. Total, $425,000 that was completely, legally, separately mine. My grandmother's inheritance, kept carefully separate for 8 years, $280,000. Total, $425,000 that was completely, legally, separately mine. I didn't confront John. Instead, I called my Uncle Robert, a retired forensic accountant. Within a week, every dollar of my separate money went into an irrevocable trust for Nathan. Untouchable by John. Untouchable by creditors. Completely protected. Then I documented everything. Every mortgage document, every hidden account, every suspicious transfer. I printed copies and stored them at my sister's house. I saved everything on encrypted drives hidden in 3 different locations. And then I waited. I knew John would leave eventually. Men like him always do. I just had to be ready when it happened. And I had to make sure that when he went down alone. 18 months of patience. 18 months of watching him dig the hole deeper. 18 months of smiling at his events while knowing our entire life was built on quicksand. I got very good at waiting. I spent 3 weeks planning John's appearance at the Harrison Foundation Gala, coordinating with the board, arranging our table, selecting which charitable projects he'd publicly endorse. I handled every detail while he took the credit, just like I'd been doing for 12 years. The ballroom glittered with 200 of the city's elite. I stood near the silent auction tables in my understated black gown, discussing donations with Elizabeth Hartwell, when I saw them approaching together. John and Naomi Fletcher, my husband and my assistant, the 28-year-old woman I'd personally hired 2 years ago. The woman I'd trained, mentored, trusted with every password and calendar entry. John's hand rested on her lower back, that casual, possessive gesture that told me everything before he even opened his mouth. My champagne suddenly tasted like poison. Barbara, John's voice carried just enough to stop nearby conversations without shouting. Heads turned. Crystal clinked against china. We need to talk. Actually, everyone should hear this, because I believe in transparency. That boardroom smile, the one that had charmed investors and closed deals for a decade. Naomi and I have been seeing each other for 8 months. We're in love. I filed for divorce this morning. The room didn't gasp. These people were too refined for theatrical reactions. Instead, a terrible silence descended, followed by the rustle of expensive fabric as 200 bodies shifted to watch my humiliation. Barbara and I grew apart years ago, John continued, his tone reasonable, measured, almost kind. She hasn't been involved in the business, doesn't share my vision. Naomi understands what I'm building. She's my true partner now. Naomi's smile dripped with false sympathy. I'm so sorry it had to happen this way, Barbara. John and I tried to spare your feelings, but we couldn't deny what we felt any longer. I catalogued the watching faces. Pity. Judgment. Barely concealed schadenfreude. I saw Elizabeth Hartwell, whose fundraiser I'd organized last spring, turn away, suddenly fascinated by her champagne. Susan Price pulled out her phone. I knew exactly how this would play tomorrow at brunches, next week at charity luncheons. Poor Barbara. Never saw it coming. But they were all wrong. I'd known John would leave eventually. I'd spent 18 months preparing for exactly this moment. Time to give them a show. I let my voice tremble, hitting that perfect note between confusion and devastation. I don't understand. John, please. We can work through this. What about Nathan? What about our family? John's expression shifted to something almost gentle, which somehow made it crueler. Nathan will adjust. My lawyers will be in touch. This is final, Barbara. I let the champagne flute slip from my fingers. It shattered against marble, glittering fragments scattering across polished stone like my life breaking apart. I covered my mouth with trembling hands and fled the ballroom with perfectly calculated sobs. The bathroom was empty. I locked the door, counted to 60 while water ran, then studied my reflection. The tears stopped instantly. My hands steadied. John had just given me the greatest gift. A ballroom full of witnesses who'd swear I was blindsided, broken, completely devastated. I pulled out my phone. Uncle Marcus? He made his move. Start the plan. I paused, allowing myself one real smile. Sharp and triumphant. And Marcus? Triple check every document. When this ends, John won't just lose everything. He'll never even see it coming. The breakdown had to look real. I made sure people saw me at the grocery store on Tuesday morning. No makeup, hair pulled back carelessly, sweatpants that looked slept in. I let my hand tremble slightly when I reached for wine bottles. By afternoon, 3 friends had texted my sister, asking if I was okay. I canceled every charity event, every committee meeting, every social obligation. My absence became its own statement. Have you seen Barbara? They'd whisper over cocktails. I heard she's completely fallen apart. Perfect. My sister played her role beautifully, posting vague but concerned messages on social media, checking in on family today. Some days are harder than others. Red heart. Everyone knew it was about me. Nathan came home from school one afternoon, threw his backpack against the wall. Everyone's talking about you and Dad. They're saying you're crazy. I held him while he cried, hating that this was necessary, knowing it would be worth it when he understood what I'd saved him from. Meanwhile, I sat in Margaret Chen's pristine office, reviewing documents that would destroy my husband's life. Margaret was exactly what I needed. Ruthless, brilliant, entirely unmoved by tears or sentiment. You understand what we're doing here? She asked, sliding a folder across her desk. If you fight for those assets in court, you become liable for his fraud. The IRS will come after you too. I know, I said. That's why I need to look like I'm fighting for everything, while actually fighting for nothing. Uncle Marcus completed his deeper audit. The Ponzi scheme was even larger than we'd thought. Dozens of elderly victims, millions in fabricated returns. Barbara, Marcus said, his voice grave, if you're still legally tied to him when this collapses, they'll investigate you too. They might charge you as an accomplice. I wasn't just escaping a bad marriage. I was escaping prison. The strategy crystallized. Demand the house, the cars, the jewelry, the lifestyle. All the visible trophies that would make John defensive and aggressive. While he fought to keep those assets, I'd be quietly negotiating the only thing that actually mattered. Complete separation of liabilities. The first mediation session was a masterclass in calculated performance. When they brought up Nathan's custody schedule, I broke down completely. My voice cracked, my hands shook as I reached for tissues. He needs stability. He needs his family intact. Kingsley Matthews, John's lawyer, took notes with barely concealed contempt. But I caught something in his eyes during the discussion of asset division, a flicker of suspicion. When John waved off his concerns impatiently, I saw Kingsley lean back in his chair, watching me with narrowed calculation. He was smart. Unlike John, he sensed something wasn't quite right. 2 more sessions followed the same pattern, my hysteria rising, John's confidence growing, Kingsley's suspicion deepening. I demanded everything: the house, all 3 cars, John's investment portfolio, even his watch collection. My voice rose hysterically. I deserve this. I built this life too. I made unreasonable demands for things I didn't even want, watching John's face redden with anger. Then came the close call. During a break in the 3rd mediation, I passed the conference room to use the restroom. Through the glass wall, I saw Kingsley alone with my financial disclosures spread across the table. His finger traced something on the page, his brow furrowed. Then his whole body went still. He picked up another document, compared them side by side. His face darkened. He looked up suddenly. Our eyes met through the glass. My heart hammered against my ribs. Had he seen it? Had he found the pattern? The careful way I'd documented every debt without claiming it as marital property? The way I'd positioned myself as ignorant rather than complicit? I let my eyes fill with tears and hurried toward the bathroom. My reflection in the mirror showed exactly what I needed it to show: a woman on the edge of collapse. I dabbed at my eyes, smudging my mascara just slightly, and returned to the mediation room. When I entered, the documents were packed away. Kingsley watched me with those calculating eyes as I took my seat. John barely glanced at me, too busy texting Naomi. Mrs. Monroe, Kingsley said carefully, I'd like to clarify something about the business accounts. You had signing authority on? I just did what John told me to do, I said quickly, my voice small and defeated. I don't understand business finances. I just want what's fair. I let my voice break. I gave him 12 years. Doesn't that count for something? John rolled his eyes. For God's sake, Barbara, we've been over this. Kingsley held up a hand, still watching me. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he turned to John. We should review the liability clauses one more time before. We've reviewed them a dozen times, John snapped. Let's just get this over with. I saw Kingsley's jaw tighten, but he nodded and made a note in his file. Had my breakdown convinced him? Or was he still suspicious? I wouldn't know until the hearing. And by then, it would be too late. 3 days before the hearing, Margaret called with news that made my blood run cold. The IRS investigation is accelerating. They've assembled a task force. Barbara, they might freeze all accounts, including yours, if they move before the divorce finalizes. They're building a RICO case. My hands went numb. How long do we have? I have a contact in the U.S. Attorney's office. She says they're aiming to execute warrants early next week. If your hearing doesn't happen Friday, if John gets cold feet and postpones, if anything delays this. She didn't need to finish. I let my eyes fill with tears and hurried toward the bathroom. My reflection in the mirror showed exactly what I needed it to show, a woman on the edge of collapse. I dabbed at my eyes, smudging my mascara just slightly, and returned to the mediation room. When I entered, the documents were packed away. Kingsley watched me with those calculating eyes as I took my seat. John barely glanced at me, too busy texting Naomi. Minigwe, the feds moved first. They'd freeze everything while they investigated. Nathan's trust might be protected, but I'd be caught in the legal machinery for years. They'd assume I was complicit. They'd dig through every transaction, every email, every moment of the last 12 years. The hearing is Friday at 9 a.m., I said. John won't postpone. He wants this done. Are you certain? I thought of Naomi's Instagram posts showing house tours of properties they were considering. I thought of John's impatience during mediation, his eagerness to start his new life. He's certain he's winning. He won't wait. Then we have 72 hours, Margaret said. If anything goes wrong, if he gets suspicious, if Kingsley convinces him to delay, you need to be ready to run. After we hung up, I sat in my small apartment and stared at my packed emergency bag, the one I'd prepared 18 months ago. Cash, documents, passports, a burner phone, everything Nathan and I would need to disappear if this went sideways. I'd never actually believed I'd need it. Now I wasn't sure. Thursday night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the hallway made me jump. Every car engine outside made me wonder if it was federal agents arriving early. I checked my phone obsessively, waiting for Margaret to call and tell me the hearing was off, that John had postponed, that Kingsley had finally convinced him something was wrong. The call never came. Friday morning arrived with pale winter sunlight. I dressed carefully. Navy suit, minimal makeup, the appearance of a woman who had already lost. My hands were steady as I buttoned my jacket. 18 months had led to this single morning. 72 hours had narrowed to 72 minutes. Time to finish this. I arrived at the courthouse at 8:30 a.m. Margaret was already there, her expression calm and professional, but I saw the tension in her shoulders. Any word? I asked quietly. Nothing yet. We're clear. She paused. But Barbara. Kingsley requested an emergency consultation with John at 8:45. They're in a conference room right now. My stomach dropped. Does he know? I don't know, but we're about to find out. At 8:52, the conference room door opened. John emerged first, his face flushed with irritation. Kingsley followed, looking exhausted and defeated. Behind them came Naomi, in a radiant dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and Mary Monroe, imperious in Chanel. John saw me and smiled, that confident, predatory smile I'd once found charming. He thought he'd won. Whatever Kingsley had said, John hadn't listened. We entered Judge Patricia Whitmore's courtroom at exactly 9 a.m. She was known for efficiency and impatience with games. We're here to finalize Monroe versus Monroe. Both parties have agreed to the terms outlined in the settlement agreement. Let's proceed. The next 15 minutes were procedural. Judge Whitmore reviewed the key terms, asked both parties if we understood, confirmed this was voluntary. Yes, Your Honor, I said, my voice tired and defeated. I just want this to be over. John's voice was strong, confident. Yes, Your Honor, we've reached a fair agreement. Judge Whitmore turned to the financial disclosures. This was the dangerous moment. Mr. Monroe, you've provided complete and accurate financial information to this court. John didn't hesitate. Yes, Your Honor, everything is disclosed. He was lying, but that was no longer my problem. Ms. Murdoch, you've reviewed the settlement and understand that you're accepting the terms as stated. Yes, Your Honor. My voice barely above a whisper. Both parties approached for signing. We stood at the table. Documents spread before us. As John reached for the pen, Kingsley leaned in one final time. His whisper was urgent, almost desperate. John, the liability assumption clause in Section 7. But Naomi, impatient and eager to finalize her new life, interrupted loudly. John, just sign it. Let's get this over with. Mary added her voice from behind us. Really, Kingsley, you've reviewed this a dozen times. Stop delaying. John, annoyed and embarrassed by his lawyer's apparent nervousness, shook off Kingsley's hand. It's fine. Kingsley made one last attempt, his voice barely audible. You're assuming sole responsibility for? I said it's fine. John's voice carried across the courtroom. He grabbed the pen and signed his name with a flourish, bold, confident, possessive. The same signature that had closed deals and impressed investors for a decade. He slid the papers toward me. I signed without hesitation. My hand didn't shake. I'd been waiting 18 months for this moment. Judge Whitmore notarized the decree. This marriage is hereby dissolved. Assets and liabilities are divided as per the signed agreement. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that sounded like a gunshot. As people gathered their things, Kingsley pulled John aside, his face ashen. I was close enough to hear. John, you just signed a document taking sole legal responsibility for all marital debt. Every mortgage, every loan, every liability, it's yours alone now. She's completely insulated. If there are any hidden liabilities, any debts that surface after this, they're your problem, not hers. I watched the blood drain from John's face, completely, utterly, like someone had opened a tap at his feet. What are you talking about? There are no hidden debts. Kingsley's voice was sharp now, angry. Then you better pray that's true, because as of 5 minutes ago, she could have evidence of debts you don't even know about, and you just legally assumed them all. He leaned closer. Did she have access to your business accounts? John's eyes found me across the courtroom. I was standing with Margaret, putting documents in my briefcase. I looked up, met his gaze, and allowed myself one small, genuine smile. That's when John knew. His Rolex, the one bought with stolen money, caught the fluorescent light as his hand began to shake. The color that had drained from his face didn't return. He looked like a man who'd just realized he was standing on a trap door, and someone was reaching for the lever. Naomi touched his arm. John, what's wrong? He didn't answer. He was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, not confusion, but the slow, dawning horror of someone who finally understands they've been played. I turned away and walked out of the courtroom with Margaret at my side. Behind me, I heard Naomi's voice rising. John? John? What is he talking about? The courtroom doors closed, muffling whatever came next. I went home to my small 2-bedroom apartment and made chamomile tea. At 2:47 p.m., my phone rang. Uncle Marcus, his voice carefully neutral. The first letter went out. The comprehensive package, 18 months of documented fraud, evidence of the Ponzi scheme, falsified loan applications, tax evasion, a detailed list of elderly victims, had been delivered to the IRS, SEC, and State Attorney General's office. Every document was time-stamped before the divorce was finalized. I was positioned not as John's accomplice, but as a concerned citizen reporting crimes I'd discovered. How long? I asked. Days, not weeks. The wheels are already turning. By midnight, Naomi posted to Instagram. Sometimes the biggest mistake is believing someone's facade. Trust your gut. She'd found the truth. My sister texted an hour later. Neighbors reported hearing shouting and glass breaking at the mansion, then saw Naomi leaving with suitcases, mascara streaked down her face. The financial avalanche came faster than I'd anticipated. Within 48 hours, the banks moved. Once one creditor filed, they all did, like sharks drawn to blood. Foreclosure proceedings on the house. Business accounts frozen. The IRS filed liens on everything John owned. 3 elderly former clients filed. By day 4, the story broke. Local investment advisor under investigation for fraud. Within hours, it was everywhere. My name appeared only briefly. His ex-wife reportedly discovered and reported the fraud. By day 4, the story broke. Local investment advisor under investigation for fraud. Within hours, it was everywhere. My name appeared only briefly. His ex-wife reportedly discovered and reported the fraud. The society pages were vicious. From gala to jail, one headline read, accompanied by the photo of John announcing his affair. That moment of his greatest arrogance was now framed as the beginning of his unraveling. Mary came to confront him at the mansion. My sister's friend reported that Mary arrived in a town car at 2 p.m. and left 90 minutes later, her face rigid with fury. She'd told him he should have protected the family name, then walked out. Even his mother had abandoned him. Week 2 brought federal agents with a warrant. John tried to implicate me, suggested I'd known about everything, that maybe they should investigate me too. Agent Torres shut that down immediately. Ms. Murdoch discovered your activities 18 months ago and has been cooperating as a witness. She's not a suspect, Mr. Monroe. She's helping us build the case against you. I imagined John's face when he realized I hadn't just escaped. I'd been documenting his crimes, building the case that would destroy him. 2 weeks after the divorce, I drove past the mansion. Through the windows, I could see John sitting alone in the darkened living room, takeout containers scattered around him. The for sale sign had a foreclosure notice plastered across it. 6 months ago, he'd had everything. Now he had nothing but debt and federal charges. And it was entirely his own doing. Nathan came home from school 3 weeks after the hearing and threw his backpack against the wall. He was 11 years old, and his world had completely imploded. Why did you let Dad sign those papers? Everyone says you tricked him. I'd been dreading this conversation. I led him to our small kitchen table and sat down across from him. Nathan, I need to tell you something about your father. 18 months ago, I discovered he was stealing money from elderly people who trusted him. He was lying to banks. He wasn't paying his taxes. He was breaking the law. Nathan's anger wavered. Then why didn't you stop him? Because if I'd stayed legally connected to your father when he got caught, and he was always going to get caught, the government might have taken everything. The money I saved for your college. This apartment. They might have even taken you away from me. After the divorce, my doorbell rang on a random Tuesday afternoon. John stood on my doorstep, released on bail pending appeals. He looked haggard, 20 pounds lighter, wearing clothes that hung on his frame like they belonged to someone else. I need help, he said. Barbara, please. I know what I did was wrong, but I'm drowning. If I can pay back the victims, they might reduce the sentence. I just need money. No. I'm Nathan's father. Don't you care what this does to him? I care about Nathan more than you ever did, I said. That's why I protected him from you. His desperation curdled into anger. You set me up. You knew about the debt, and you let me sign those papers. You committed fraud, John. You stole from elderly people. You built your empire on lies and borrowed money. I didn't make you do any of that. I just made sure that when it all collapsed, and it was always going to collapse, it didn't bury me and Nathan too. I loved you. For a moment, he almost sounded sincere. No, I said quietly. You loved what I did for you. You loved having an invisible woman managing your life while you took credit. You loved having someone to blame when things went wrong. But you never loved me, John. You didn't even see me. He stared at me, and I watched the realization finally hit him. No one was going to save him. Not his mother, not Naomi, not me, no one. The Barbara I married would have helped me, he said bitterly. The Barbara you married doesn't exist anymore. I got her back. I closed the door. Through the window, I watched him walk away, shoulders slumped, heading toward a future he'd built entirely for himself. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated or victorious. I just felt free. 6 months later, I opened Clarity Financial Services from a small office with a view of the river. Barbara M. Murdoch. I'd reclaimed my maiden name, specializing in helping people untangle complex financial situations. My particular expertise? Helping women protect their assets before and during divorce. Margaret Chen referred my first client, a woman whose husband ran a successful tech startup that was actually burning through investor money. Over 3 sessions, I taught her exactly what I'd done. How to document everything, how to protect separate assets, how to position herself legally so that when his house of cards collapsed, she'd be standing safely outside the wreckage. Within 3 months, I had 6 clients. Within 6 months, I had a waiting list. John's trial was mercifully quick. He took a plea deal. 8 years in federal prison for tax evasion, wire fraud, and elder financial abuse. The mansion sold at auction, proceeds going to his victims. Mary Monroe released a statement. I am deeply disappointed in John's choices. She never visited him in prison. Never wrote. That evening, Nathan and I made dinner together in our small kitchen. Nothing fancy, just pasta and salad. But we laughed while we cooked. And for the first time in 12 years, I wasn't performing. I wasn't calculating my next move. I wasn't invisible. I was just Barbara. Finally, completely, myself. And that was worth everything. If you loved this story, like, share, and subscribe to get a notification, because the next story will sweep you off your feet.